Welcome to What's Up in Real Estate, an important program for you and your family, covering the people, places, trends, and issues in real estate within the South Bay Area. With your hosts, Brian Stuckey, Dan Lawson, and featuring Greg Flowers. Now, here's Brian Stuckey.
Hello, welcome to What's Up in Real Estate. I'm Brian Stuckey. Today my guest is Gary Redenbacher. He's a real estate attorney based in Santa Cruz, but he covers the Santa Clara Valley as well. He's been an attorney for 7 years, mainly emphasizing construction, litigation, and he also has about 10 years as a contractor. Is that correct, Gary?
Yeah, general contractor, heating, ventilating, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Gary's our guest today, and Gary, first thing is that you're pretty specific in your litigation, and that's with mainly construction, but though you do cover other areas of law, real estate law.
Yeah, you try and cover the whole gamut of real estate law, but right now what's hot is all the problems in construction. There's always landlord-tenant problems, there's always title problems, but construction's the key thing for me. Okay,
with construction, just to start out with, who would be your most common clients that you would represent?
Well, of course you're always going to have the contractor who's fighting against a subcontractor, but more common perhaps than that is the owner who has just done a remodel and the contractor hasn't done as good a job as they would like, or vice versa, the subcontractor or the contractor's done the work and the owner hasn't paid him. So any kind of a dispute like that that's going on.
So you can represent a contractor against a homeowner?
Right, against a homeowner, or a homeowner against the contractor when the place leaks. It's endless, the number of permutations and arguments that people can get into.
Mm-hmm. As far as a homeowner, what are the most common construction problems that you would see that they would bring to you saying that, hey, we've got a problem here? What would be a common, or the most common ones?
It leaks.
Oh, the roof leaks?
Well, you know, it's not the darn roof. And I'm telling this right now to everybody, don't put living area under a deck. I mean, that is by far the most common problem that I think that I see, is that some deck is built above a living area, and then it leaks at the junction of the wall and the floor.
Are you talking about like a second story deck dropping down to a living area?
Yeah, something like that. The decks always seem to leak. So I'd say that's my most common one lately.
Okay. Is there like plumbing situations that you run into as well? And, or, you know, your first thing when you say leak, you think of a roof leaking, of course.
Yeah, you don't find the plumbing leaks quite so often, but every once in a while you have a plumber who sweated a copper joint and it breaks and gets everything wet. But that's not nearly as common as the old deck leak or the roof leak, and the contractor won't come out and fix it, or he can't figure out how to fix it.
On the other side of the coin, I want to wonder what a contractor, is he basically the only litigation that you deal with on a contractor side, if you're representing contractors, that they're not getting paid?
That is the most common thing, because really, if you think about a contract between a contractor and an owner, what is the owner supposed to do for the contractor? Pay him. That's it. Now, the contractor is supposed to put together 100,000 different pieces for the owner. So any of those 100,000 things can go wrong over here, but as far as the owner and the contractor, for the most part, you just have to pay him.
Okay. Now, when you're selecting a contractor, you want to make the wisest decision. You might look through the yellow pages, you see a contractor's license there. Is that good enough? What are some common mistakes that someone would have when they hire a contractor to build their home or an improvement?
Most common mistake is going with a low bid. That's my opinion, and people yell and scream at me for this, but don't use that as your only criteria, because you can get people that will just completely miss it with that low bid. You really need to look at those bids and tear them apart and make sure that these contractors understand what it is that they're building for you. And so don't just be wedded to the idea of low bid. Make sure the guy can do the job. That's not to say that a low bid can't do the job, but you have to take the time to check his references, to make sure he understands the plans, and make absolutely certain that if you are going to go with the low bid, the guy can do it.
You mentioned checking references and knowing that they can do this work. Would it be unusual for someone to say, hey, I'd like to see your complete portfolio, maybe a book of some of the work that you've done? Would that be unusual?
Not unusual at all, and most good contractors will have a portfolio.
Okay.
Remember, of course, they're only going to show you the good stuff.
Yeah, I'd hate to see this is when I first started out, some of the mistakes. I mean, not too many people would do that, I guess. Now, as far as on the job, a contractor goes in there, they feel like they can handle this job, they were the successful bidder. between the contractor and the subcontractor, there's sometimes a discrepancy. I imagine the contractor is the head man of this, or woman in this situation.
That's right.
Now, is there problems that can develop in there?
Well, sure. And one of the more common problems is the subcontractor comes in and says, no, that wasn't in my contract. You, the general contractor, was supposed to do this item. And the general contractor starts arguing with the sub saying, no, you were supposed to do it. That's a fairly common problem that we see. Usually it can be ironed out, and it's fairly standard in the trade who's supposed to do what.
Mm-hmm. But do you get in situations where there's, you know, they can't work it out? And next thing you know, you got everybody involved. You got the owner, who's upset with the contractor, who's supposed to be overseeing the whole thing, and it just trickles right down?
Oh yes, very often. And of course the owner starts getting frustrated because the delays are coming in because the subcontractor is walking off the job. So usually what you do, you have to bring everybody in. You hope that everybody will just talk it out at first. You know, if it really gets nasty, then you have to go to the Contractor State License Board or even litigate. But usually if you start talking, most people will come around.
It just seems like this could be the starting point where you've got a lot of attorneys involved.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a normal scenario?
Oh, it's ugly. And sometimes I've been in court where you'll be in a courtroom and there'll be 100 attorneys. And they'll be slowly going through each case. And one or two attorneys, 3 or 4, maybe stand up. And then all of a sudden a construction defect case comes up and half the courtroom stands up. Because every single subcontractor is represented, every single contractor, all the owners, the investors, the lenders, and it's just a mess.
Now, you were a contractor yourself, a general contractor for 10 years. Maybe the statute of limitations, I don't know if it's passed by or not, but can you give us a story of what maybe a situation you went through as a contractor, that there was litigation involved? Or
I never got sued.
Okay.
I never got sued. In fact, I never even got called back, believe it or not, for a repair after I got finished. So I got lucky. But I would consider myself lucky because I think in any contractor's lifetime, they're going to be called back for a serious repair once or twice. So I just got lucky I got out of it before that happened to me.
Well, certainly your years as a contractor would help you as far as being able to look at different litigation that comes your way.
Oh, yeah. And usually I can have a pretty good view for both the owner and the contractor. I can talk to the contractor on his terms, say, listen, you know, this is really what you have to do. Otherwise, this is going to happen. You don't want that to happen. And they'll listen to me because I was there swinging a hammer.
Okay. Now, with architects and engineers, they're involved in this. And usually when you're thinking of an architect, you're thinking about a larger project, perhaps.
Yes.
A high-end type of home, if it's a residence. And that's what we're talking about mainly today is residence. But in a situation like that, are they mistake-free, or what are some common mistakes that an architect or an engineer could make?
One of the things I see architects doing these days is they are not thorough enough with their drafting. They don't do the details. Now, they'll come back and say, well, it's just not economically feasible. I can't draft every single little tiny connection, every single little tiny flashing detail on a residential home. They just couldn't afford that. Perhaps not, but at the same time, if you don't do those details, then the darn thing leaks, or you have problems and the contractor can't figure out what to do in the field. You can't make the field decision because it's too technical. And I see that problem. The other problem I see with architects is sometimes they try to sneak around the zoning requirements. And that creates problems. A real common one is that you can only grade so much cubic yards of dirt when you go to build a home. And architects know that. So if they determine that it's going to take more than, say, 300 cubic yards of dirt to move, they're just going to put it down in their plans as 300 yards anyway. So it gets by the zoning department. Now, I've seen that on a few occasions. And of course, when it turns out it's 1,600 cubic yards that have to be graded, you have a big problem. So I don't know. I've just seen that a couple of times recently, and I just wonder why an architect would do that.
Well, isn't even an architect subject to an inspection?
No, the architect really isn't subject to the inspection. It's all the work that goes on that's subject to the inspection.
But shouldn't they see some defect in the work as an architecture, in that work of an architect by the inspector?
You could, in fact, see something like that. What the problem usually is during the construction, the contractor will find some detail that's been drafted that simply won't work.
Okay.
And then they go back to the architect and says, I'm sorry, but we just can't put this heating vent here because we have to go right through the glue lamp.
Okay.
And that's usually what happens. And then the architect just says, oh, okay, well, we'll just do a new detail. And he does a design change, and everything usually works out.
Okay. We're talking with Gary Redenbacher. He's a real estate attorney, specializing mainly in construction, though a wide spread of other areas of litigation. One thing, too, I want to mention is that if you can figure out Gary's other claim to fame, we're going to send you a free appraisal, not appraisal, take it back, a credit report if you'd like that. But get a hold of us and figure out his other claim to fame, and we'll give you something special. Give us a call if you have any questions. If you need any questions answered by Gary, you can go through us, and we'll make sure that he gets those questions. When we come back, we'll continue with Gary Redenbacher. We'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye.
He got it from his father, Claude Harmon, PGA club professional and 1948 Masters champion. He's given it to kings and presidents, and especially to children. Like PGA professionals across America, Dick Harmon has a special passion for golf, which means that anywhere, anytime someone is willing to learn, Dick just can't help wanting to teach. PGA professionals like Dick Harmon are making golf a better game.
Welcome back to What's Up in Real Estate. I'm with Gary Redenbacher, and he's a real estate attorney, covers the Santa Clara Valley and Santa Cruz. And we've been talking mainly about construction litigation that Gary would be involved in with contractors, engineers, architects, and all that type of thing. But what would be considered a construction defect? We've talked about leaks and some of those other things. Maybe I'm being redundant here, Gary, but what is considered a defect?
Well, it's a good question, actually. A lot of times owners think that something cosmetic is a defect. For instance, the people painted a color and they don't like the color. I'm not sure that that's a defect. It usually isn't, unless in the specifications it said it was supposed to be this color and the guy painted it this color. But a defect is basically anything that doesn't work in your house when it was supposed to work.
So it could be a cosmetic thing. You look at it, you say, that just doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I assume that might have been something discussed, is that this is the color we want.
Yes, usually, and you will. But you're right, a lot of times owners don't understand that you're not building a piano here, you're building a house, and the level to which this thing is built is not fine furniture, it's at a different level. And they will sometimes focus on that and think that it is a defect rather than just a cosmetic flaw. It might not even be a cosmetic flaw, it might just be the standard within the trade. Mm-hmm. Now, you got to be careful that you don't take that too far, because at some point that cosmetic flaw is going to become a defect. Mm-hmm. You really have to sit there and take a look and judge every single case on its own merits.
Mm-hmm. Now, what if a contractor, they just disagree, and he's just not going to fix it? I imagine that, of course, the logical thing, that's when you come into it, but is there another explanation? If there's another scenario here that if he just won't fix it?
Is there another way to get him to fix it?
Yes.
Yeah, you could call the contractor state license board.
Okay.
And you could ask them to intervene on your behalf. By the like token, sometimes the contractors will call the contractor state license board and ask them to intervene on their behalf because the owner isn't paying them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they often want to do is determine, is this a defect, or is it just that the owners are being too picky, or is it that the contractor doesn't understand the level at which he should have been building? Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty nice way of going. It doesn't involve lawyers. If it's a really big defect, I don't think that'll work. But for relatively small things, and of course there's small claims court too.
Mm-hmm. Now with the regards to somebody, a homeowners association type of thing, you had mentioned before that there seems to be a lot of problems with homeowners associations.
Oh yes.
Why is that?
Well, there is a statute, and it says that if there's going to be a problem with your house, it has to be discovered within 10 years. Bam, otherwise it's cut off. So literally there are people out there that go around to the homeowners associations and literally, I don't know any of these people, but I've been told, this is all hearsay, that knock on the doors of some of these homeowners associations and say, listen, I understand this was built almost 10 years ago. We should start looking around and see if there are any defects here. And if there are, we need to sue the contractor so as to make sure that you get this fixed before the statute runs out. Now, there was a lot of abuse on that going on. And now the legislature has responded, and there's supposed to be this whole kind of like mediation process they have to go through before they sue. But yeah, that was an amazing little area of law there for quite a few years, and I guess it's still going on to some degree. But I understand that I'm involved in a couple right now where the mediation process seems to be working pretty well, the the new laws.
Okay. It goes into a financing type of thing too, because that's one of the most common questions that we get asked as far as financing is under litigation. Is that what they're referring to?
Yeah, and actually there's a number of, for instance, insurers that will not insure contractors if they're doing a homeowners association these days. Because the feeling is that they're sure to get sued within 10 years. So a number of liability carriers won't even insure a contractor.
Is there a statute of limitations that they have as far as a period of time that you can have some sort of recourse for a construction flaw?
Almost all general liability policies are what we call occurrence policies. They're not all, but most of them are. So if that carrier was the one on board while the contractor was building it, then they're online for that during that period of time. Now, it seems to me there's probably some point at which the insurance carrier is off the hook. But I haven't researched that lately. I couldn't tell you when. And the insurance lawyers, I'm sure they'll tell you exactly when.
Now, is there a publication, or is there any way to get a hold of a good contractor? We had talked about, you know, they should have someone, they should give you some sort of resume or profile of what they've done in the past. But how do you go about finding a good one?
I actually, believe it or not, I believe in going to your insurance carrier and asking your insurance people, because a lot of insurance carriers deal with contractors on a daily basis, and they know which ones they think do a good and decent job. That's one way. Another way is call up some suppliers and ask them. Now, suppliers will be kind of loath to tell you, oh, this guy's good or that guy's good, because they have a whole bunch of contractors as customers, and they don't want to favor one over the other. But if you press them, say, well, which ones just always pay their bills, which ones are really responsible, a supplier may well give you a name, and usually they will. They'll just say it under their breath and say, don't tell them I told you this. Of course, you always want to check out people they have built for. They're going to give you names that people are going to give a glowing recommendation, but still, call them anyway and press them a little bit.
Would you recommend sitting down with a 2, 3, 4, or what would be a recommendation there?
I'd say at least
referrals.
2 or 3. I mean, this is a big investment you're going to make. If you're going to do remodel, if you're going to build a new home, anything like that, it's a lot of money involved. It's worth the time to talk to at least 2 or 3 references. Okay.
We run into a situation with lending quite a bit where somebody's put on a roof. Maybe that's a contingency that they have between the buyer and the seller, that, okay, we need a new roof and we'll buy this property.
Right.
Now they're antsy to close, and maybe the roofer's not getting the work done in time. But everybody's antsy. The real estate agents say, we got to close at this time because they need to close this one so my sellers can purchase another property because they're buyers of another property. What are some problems that you can run if you're trying to speed up the course, and let's say the roofer is a little bit behind?
Well, what the problem you're talking about is they're afraid, the lender is afraid, that if the roofer finishes and doesn't get paid, well, then he'll slap a lien on the property, a mechanics lien. And that is something that all owners need to be very concerned about whenever they're involved in any kind of construction, remodel, anything, is to make sure that the subcontractors are in fact being paid. Because the subcontractor can come back and lien your property if they've given you what's called a pre-lien beforehand.
Well, what's the result of putting mechanics lien on the property?
Well, mechanics lien on the property really does what we call cloud the title. And no lender will lend if the title is lended, or it's very rare that they will anyway. You'd know that. If it is then liened, that subcontractor, if he really wants to be really nasty, and sometimes they will then foreclose on your property, have it sold, so that they can get paid. Usually it doesn't go that far, but I mean, they do have that right to do it.
I've never seen one that far, but you know, I know the fear of it is enough to make sure that the work's done, everybody's paid, and then it records at that point. I want to ask you a question, and if my mom is watching tonight, Mom, I'm sorry, but we did have you know, we extended the house a little bit. We put a extra room on the house, but there's no permit, at least as far as I know as of this point. I know from a real estate side that if my mom was to ever sell or refinance or something, that portion would not be given value. But is there any way that somebody who's got an extra addition to the house or whatever can get a permit on that, even though they don't have one existing?
Oh yeah, you could certainly go down to the county or the city, whichever jurisdiction it falls under, and ask for getting a permit now. And they'll ask you to do things like knock a few holes in the wall, make sure the electrical is done. They'll have a number of conditions. I say, to avoid the penalties they'll charge you, See if there's any amnesty period coming up when you're allowed to do that, because every once in a while planning departments will have amnesty periods where if you claim past transgressions, they'll let go all the penalties. So that's the best time. Although I don't know, Santa Clara Valley, I don't know when they've had any amnesty programs lately.
Well, Gary, I want to thank you for coming on today. We're out of time here. I'd love to have you come back on again. Once again, I want to ask you if you can figure out Gary's second claim to fame in this life. Certainly these days it's his law practice, which has been very successful, but he's a successful entrepreneur in another fashion. And if you can do that, give us a call, email us, whatever, walk down to our office, and we'll give you a special gift. I want to thank Gary Redenbacher, real estate attorney, for being with us today. When we come back, Dan Loss and Greg Flowers will be with us with some economic information. See you in a bit.
Like any PGA professional, Mark Cruz can show you how to save a few strokes, correct a slice, deal with a hook, chip up to the green, master fairway woods, control the yips, and even arrange tee times. After all that, he can also help you with your golf game. PGA professionals like Mark Cruz are making golf a better game.
Welcome back to our show. I'm Dan Lawson. I'm here with Greg Flowers. We're going to talk about the economy and the economic issues that are happening globally, specifically Hong Kong, but we're going to try to tie that into the domestic market and how this might affect you with regard to real estate interest rates. So, Greg, before we get going, how are you doing today?
Good to be back.
Super. Well, Greg, Hong Kong, that's the news of the hour. So why don't we break this down into some simplistic chat about how Hong Kong really has had such a dramatic effect. I mean, the average person busily working in their jobs or hearing all this going on and the stock market moving up and down and up and down.
Right.
And even for me, I'm wondering, why is Hong Kong having such a dramatic effect on what's happening to us domestically?
This has really shown us how much of a global economy the United States is. We are all partners. In essence, we have each other's hand in each other's pockets. It's almost
That's
like,
a good way of putting it.
You know, we are definitely a global economy, and when one is downward, we are affected downward, as opposed to, and London is affected downward. We're all within the same cycle, and that's happened a lot because of NATO and because of the World Trade Center and all the things that are happening globally. But in essence, the bottom line is what had happened was Hong Kong had dropped. A lot of investors needed quality. The United States economy is the strongest economy right now in the world, and our Treasury bond is the most secure interest of a security. And
so people are selling stocks.
And they're renting from equities and going to debt, and being the debtor, the United States government, and that's infected interest rates dramatically.
Well, let's talk a bit about debt, just for the average person. Now, when someone buys a bond, they're actually loaning the government money.
In essence, yeah, the United States government now owes us. In the States, the other way around. It's a nice way to be.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing.
So in essence, that's the way it is. As a bond, it is a debtor, and the United States government is the payee in that regard.
So what's the mentality about a person, or the philosophy behind this move? So they want to sell off from a company and then become a debtor to the government?
Well, think about it as that. If there's going to be speculation in stocks, then they're concerned about the earnings in the company, and of course the market value of the stock is going to drop. So people are going to run to the United States government, and then that will be the security. So people are selling equities, going into debt, which affected interest rates. They're adversely proportional. If the bond market goes up, then our interest rates do go down, and that's what's happened to bonds. The yields were up over 102 and 103, so that's a strong bond. It's a premium over a par, which is
and let's talk interest rates, because people probably see that. It's the interest rates have gone from say the mid sixes down to the low sixes in a very short time, and it's because there's so many investors buying that long-term 30-year bond.
So we had interest rates drop dramatically just within one day. It was almost adversely proportionate, like I said, to the stock market. The stock market took a hit, interest rates went down as well, and the bonds went up. So what we're now seeing is even better interest rates, and the long bond, that I actually saw the long bond at 6.10, which is the lowest it's been
in many years.
Oh yes. So you're looking at the 30-year fixed at its all-time low.
Well, when we talk about interest rates, we have to talk about the Federal Reserve and Alan Greenspan. And there's a few more meetings coming up before the end of the year. How are they looking at things? Let's try to bring us into full swing here with regard to real estate interest rates and so on.
They're still seeing, the essence of the economy is not changed. We still have strong growth and low inflation, which is ideal for anything to happen. So you can't say that because the stock market took a hit that that's changed the economy. So the fundamentals are still there for strong growth and earnings. So if you're looking at where interest rates will go, nothing should change fundamentally on the Fed policy. Now, looking outside the United States government, if you're looking at the Hong Kong market or other markets and the way our dollar is affected towards their yen or the pound versus the dollar, that can definitely affect imports and exports. So to raise interest rates may lower the dollar, and which will help our imports. So that may be a move the Fed makes. It won't be because of our economy, but it may be because of other economies purchasing our goods.
Okay, so for the benefit of the people that aren't economists or have an economic background.
Wow, that was hard to even think about.
You almost lost me, Greg.
Oh, sorry.
So, but I'm just kidding. But seriously, let's just call it as we see it.
Right.
The Feds may raise rates to deflate the dollar to make our imports more valuable overseas to keep our economy at least reasonably strong if we're trying to curtail a lot of the things that are affecting us,
right,
like the trade deficit and all these other factors.
Right, but it won't be because of our economy. So if
very often that's the case.
That is.
They're concerned about inflation, they're concerned about this issue or that issue and so on.
Exactly. So don't look towards the economy to give you signals on if the interest rates are going to fall or rise. It's going to be because of the rise or fall in the dollar, or because of some other economy raising their interest rates, then we in turn need to do the same with ours.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, let me massage this crystal ball of ours. You know, what's the prognosis? Would you advise people to lock?
I would, on a short term, because the markets are so choppy, I would lock. If you're fishing for a market, I wouldn't fish any, for a rate, I wouldn't probably fish any longer than 15 days because after 30 days, anything could happen. I mean, it's so volatile right now. I would say lock in under 15 days, definitely. In 30 days, even 30 days, I would really lock.
And if you haven't started loan, you really should move.
Move
to get started.
Lock the rate first, start the loan.
Well, thanks very much for being with us today. Join us next week. Do someone a favor and do something nice when they're not expecting it. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.